so many people looking for love.
I know, it's really sad.
It's really sad, and there's a lot of people that are alone. There's so much loneliness in the world that, you know, even if it is through meeting someone at one of these workshops or just perhaps feeling more connected to another human being, you know, that's hope. That's hope. I've had a lot of women come to me and, you know, just sort of look for inspiration to find the perfect partner. And I you know, I have to break the truth to them. That's not, it doesn't just land on your lap and just happen from one day to the next. It's a nurturing of the relationship, of the self within the relationship and within the union.
I'm Farah Shammas. Welcome to Hotel Talk. We hope you enjoy listening to this friendly conversation between people connected by real life in hotels.
Welcome, everyone. Today I have with us Hélène Alexi Ioannides, who is a systemic therapist and leadership coach. So we're going to have definitely a very interesting conversation. Hélène, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Farah.
I'm really
it's a pleasure to be here.
excited. I'm really excited. So let's start with telling us, what is systemic therapy?
So systemic therapy is when we look at generational trauma and how that's been passed down from the generations before, through bloodlines, through ancestral patterns. It looks at the belief systems that we carry, the loyalties we have to our family and members of our family, as well as any unconscious patterns that we may be living out throughout our lives.
I love this topic because I think it's so true. And I'm a massive believer in nurture over nature. So nature does play a huge role. Our genetics are so important. They are there. We've got characteristics that are genetic. Yeah. But do they come out because they're just there, or is it because our parents bring them out, our grandparents, our surroundings? It's so interesting. And I think, you know, it's so much about our environment that shapes who we are. And there are studies of identical twins that are separated and they come out completely differently. And a very famous one I read years ago of one child who developed schizophrenia, and the other didn't. So they were born with that tendency, but the one developed it badly.
Yes.
And the other was like living a completely different life because it'd been in a different environment.
Exactly. So the environment triggered some sort of response that then brought to surface the same genomes, the same genes that they both were carrying.
Yeah. And then I always take it a bit further when it comes to food, because people say, well, genetically I'm prone to heart things, or genetically I've got a skin condition, genetically. Yes, but you know, when my father had it, my grandfather, but they also ate the same rubbish you're eating.
Correct.
So if you change that, you know, a lot of it is not just like, oh, you can do nothing about it. So that's where my definitely plant-based nutrition comes in. And leadership coach. So you also, who do you coach for leadership? Tell us, like.
So I work with corporate companies where we work on leadership dynamics within the company and how a lot of the roles that they will undertake are they'll need to basically work more on coming to being able to speak their truth, or come from a place of how do I communicate with certain people. And the other segment of people that I work with is women in leadership, where a lot of women have suppressed their voice. They don't know where their boundaries are. They need to work on knowing more about who they are in order to be able to then embody a leadership role, whether that's in their personal life or in their business life.
Yeah, interesting. And why is that important to you? How did you end up there?
Oh, gosh. Well, I spent many years figuring out who I was. And I went through a period of about 10 years. So I started off by studying real estate and finance. Really wanted to make my parents proud and going into something a little bit more corporate. But very early on, I realized that wasn't for me. I developed a psychosomatic disorder where it made it impossible for me to even leave the house at times.
So you had like acute anxiety?
It was
like
acute anxiety. It was a physiological response as well. Socially, it was very difficult for me to communicate. at times. I would stutter at times. I would just feel very uncomfortable. Although I was very confident as a child and very sociable, when this came about, it just, my whole personality changed. And so I realized, okay, there's something in my environment that isn't working for me because that's not me. So what do I have to do to change this? And that's when I think my self-development spiritual journey began. I started to really go within and figure out, okay, well, if that's not me and what I'm doing doesn't represent me, what is? And I realized that I wasn't in a position of power within myself. So I wasn't embodying the leader within me that I've always known. And I actually followed my husband from country to country while he was developing his career, building his life. And I just sort of took a back role, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. We moved from Italy to London to Saudi Arabia. And then when I went to Saudi, I moved into the wellness space, wellness and empowerment space. And I started to train women in exercise, in wellness, in health and wellness. And when I would bring a lot of these women together in groups, I started to feel like, okay, this is something that I really feel empowered to do. See women come together, build confidence. And I moved from personal training to then working on their mindsets and empowerments. And I would see the shift in them because they are a very deprived society. And just being there as a foreigner and being in a space and position of power to help them feel empowered, it just gave me that spark that I thought, okay, this is what really lights me up and this is what I want to be doing.
Which year was that when we were in Saudi?
So we've been in Cyprus for 3 years now, and we were there for 6 years. So that was 9 years ago, 9 years ago from today.
Yeah, I went to Saudi last year and I was so impressed.
Yeah?
Like Riyadh, I just thought it's an amazing place. I think to be there now with all the changes happening. And as a woman, I just couldn't believe it. And the vibe was really good. And I never thought I'd say that, about Saudi. But I've told them. And, I have so much respect. We were invited by Princess Noura and had, it was just an amazing experience. Yeah. So
Saudi's very different now to what it was.
Definitely.
When I was there, we couldn't drive. I wasn't allowed to drive. We had to wear an abaya. It was very different. But the changes over time, I think, made it a really amazing place.
It's really moving. So tell us about fitness, because when I first met you, which there must have been 3 years ago when you first came to Cyprus, you were very much into fitness. You were doing like boot camps. And I know my sister-in-law joined your class. And everyone was like, wow, you've lost inches and we feel so great. And so tell us a bit about that. How did you get into fitness and are you still doing it?
Yes. So I'm not teaching it anymore.
Yeah.
But I feel like fitness is part of my life. It's who I am. I was an athlete. I was playing volleyball for 6 or 7 years growing up, and it just stayed part of my life. I absolutely love it. And I think that the best way to reconnect to our bodies and to ourselves is through the body. Yeah. I can't imagine living my life without exercise, without just having done these boot camps as well with
But you're not doing the boot camps anymore.
I'm not doing the boot camps anymore because I just feel like that's not, I really want to focus more on the coaching side. Yeah, I've done that. And I feel like it's one or the other. And a lot of the times people will approach me to train them as a personal trainer, but then they don't look at what's going within. And that's where the core of everything is.
Are you ever tempted though now, as like when you're coaching maybe leadership, to be like, but you need to do, you need to move, and don't you want to then also help them on that side?
Yes, but I'll then recommend them to someone else instead of doing that myself, because we've only got so much time during the day.
Can't do everything.
I'm a mum,
Absolutely. So, okay, let's rewind and go back to the beginning.
Yes.
Where were you born? Tell us a bit about you, your parents, growing up, and what led you into this path.
So I was born in London. I was there for 2 weeks apparently, and then they brought me back to Cyprus. So I was raised in Cyprus. I grew up over here.
Both your parents are Cypriot?
Both of them are Cypriot, but my mother was raised in the UK. So my grandparents were there for 40 years.
Yeah.
My mother was there for 20 years. And then when she had me...
Oh, so she had you really young?
She had me about, I think she was like 26, 27.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they moved back to Cyprus and I was raised over here.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, so 2 weeks after you were born, they said, right, let's go back.
So I've got the British passport and not much experience of living there as a youngster.
So then you grew up in Limassol?
I grew up in Limassol, yeah. Went to school here and then went to university.
Which school did you go to?
I was in Foley's and then I went to grammar school. And I also tried public school as well.
Okay.
So
You've done a bit of everything.
I have, yeah. A bit of an experiment.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. And then you went to uni?
And I went to uni. I went to Reading University.
Okay.
I studied real estate and finance.
Yeah, you said.
And then I moved to Italy with Stefano. We had met at that point.
So where did you meet your husband?
We actually met in Ayanapa on the beach.
Ah, imagine.
Not really the place you expect to meet.
Yeah. My cousin has a story like that. He went on holiday, I think to like Ibiza or something, and no one thinks they're going to meet the love of their life. And this is like 30 years later, they're still together.
And we're both from Limassol, and we were both abroad at the time, so the likelihood of being in Ayanapa at the same time.
Yeah, meant to be.
Yeah, exactly, it was meant to be.
And tell us about that, because I remember at one stage you were posting quite a lot about healthy relationships, couples. I think you did some seminars or workshops about that. And I imagine that was inspired by your relationship with him and your growth. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. I believe that the foundation of every family is the relationship. So the relationship, the feminine and the masculine have within the union. And it's really important to be able to differentiate that from the family itself. So yes, you're a mother and a father, but who are you within the relationship as well? And how do you show up for each other? And how do you reconnect? And I think this idea of relationships, I think there's a presentation of it where people have this idea that it just needs to be easy all the time and it's picture perfect, and that's far from the truth. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of reconnection and consistency to sort of meet each other on a daily or weekly basis. And I've had a lot of women come to me and, just sort of look for inspiration to find the perfect partner. And I have to break the truth to them. That's not, it doesn't just land on your lap and just happen from one day to the next. It's a nurturing of the relationship, of the self within the relationship and within the union itself. So,
and you have to love yourself, to find the right person and then keep on loving yourself to give more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what really inspired us to want to do more work around this, around couples, because there's so many people looking for love.
I know, it's really sad.
It's really sad. And there's a lot of people that are alone. There's so much loneliness in the world that, even if it is through meeting someone at one of these workshops or just perhaps feeling more connected to another human being, that's hope. That's hope.
Yeah. And I mean, I know from one of my closest friends in the UK who never until now hasn't got married, but she's like, you know what? I've met so many soul sisters. So I haven't met my soul mates, but she said, I have soul friends. And that's, for now, she's like, that's enough for me and I'm happy. And, she enjoys her time alone. She enjoys her work. And so I think there's also this, unnatural expectation or just these pushes from all, these social
what it
media,
should be like, yes.
What it should be like, what it should look like. This and this and this. And it doesn't. Happiness can appear in so many different forms in people's lives when they're ready to accept that. And, we don't all have to be like our neighbour. And that's part of the problem, I think, in, 2025 and beyond, is that we have too many things to compare ourselves to. And that's why there's so much unhappiness in the world. And because everyone's like, well, I'm okay, or I'm married, and I've got my kids. But actually, they look happier than me.
Yes.
Or, or she's slimmer than me. Or, they have a better car. And there's this comparison.
Constant comparison.
Yeah. There was a huge study done in looking back at the 1950s, because that's when the happiness gauge was at its highest. And they were like, why? Because the war had just ended. People weren't that wealthy. You know, there was a big movement as well for women to go back into the house because they'd, you know, suddenly been in the workplace. And they were like, so why is everyone so happy? And the reason was because most people were in the same boat. So there was this massive kind of emergence of middle class in the States. And everybody could own a house. They all had a new car and an old car. They all could have one holiday a year. And they all had food. And so everyone was roughly the same. So the whole neighborhoods were filled with the same, and everyone was happier. Because there wasn't, oh, but 1 minute they've got 5 cars and they've only got a bicycle, and they've got private school, but they've got this and the world was at its happiest, or at least the Western world.
I think that's it's a good reminder when we go back to simplicity to just reconnect with what's important instead of comparing. I know it's natural for us to compare, and it's easy to say don't compare, but there's a point where if you start to think, well, what would my life be like without it? Yeah. What would my life be like if I didn't have food on the table? I become more grateful for it. I get to see life differently. Then I'm not comparing myself to, well, they have, they've got dinners every night and they're out every night. So how does that compare to my life? So just taking it back to, I think, having the comparison of what it would be like to not have it really reminds us.
And just gratitude. So what are your biggest tips to your clients, like to find that happiness, to find self-contentment, to love themselves? Like what are the starting blocks that people can use when they come to you just kind of lost and looking for help?
There's a few points there. I think first is finding a way to reconnect to the self. And that could be through exercise, that could be through meditation, that could be through a process of slowing down and really taking it easy. So that would be the first point. And I think that's very important because we live in such a fast-paced society where everything is fast, everything is
instantaneous.
It's instantaneous. It's very fabricated as well. There's just so much of that instant gratitude that it doesn't leave much room to really take in the essence of life and to really slow down. So that would be the first thing that I would recommend to everyone. Find the thing that works for you. That could be art, painting, that could be meditation, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be what everyone else preaches, but you need to work with yourself a little bit to figure out what it is that you like and what works for you. The other thing that I would say is just having really strong boundaries as well. So knowing where your own boundaries are within a relationship, within a friendship, within your work, that really helps you come back to yourself again. To then know, okay, well, how do I deal with each situation? And if something's come up that I don't like, do I speak up about it? Do I hold it in? And how do I deal with that? And I think it's important for so many of us to speak our truth. There's too much, there's too many facades where we hide behind roles and titles and wealth, that it really takes away from who we are. And having that knowing of the self is very, very important. And that comes down from boundaries, from placing those boundaries with people, with your environments, and speaking up for yourself too.
But because a lot of people listening to that will say, well, easier said than done. It's so true. We should have our boundaries. We should speak up for ourselves. But what if it's a family member or a good friend or a relative and we're going to offend them, or they're quite aggressive or quite steadfast, or they can, almost bully us, or they won't accept that. And okay, the easiest thing to say, well, you're not responsible for how they feel. You're only responsible for yourself. You've got to be honest with yourself. But, when you've grown up in a way and that's the dynamic you have with your mother or your,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly you come and say, well, no, I'm putting my limit now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge shift, and it can be shocking to people's core on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So how does someone get over that and, really go down that path? I know that's quite a loaded question.
Yeah.
But
I think that takes practice. I think and it's not about just, you just mentioned there's someone who's might be aggressive, or there's a way that they deal with you that triggers you, right? I think going from the shift of saying, right, I'm not going to take this,
yeah.
right, and coming and confronting them face to face is going to be really challenging for the self. So therefore, what's one small thing that you could do that could perhaps reinstate that boundary, but without you having to confront them directly? That could be leaving the room. That could be taking a step back, or saying something, but not directly saying it in a clever way. So playing with that dynamic in a way that helps you feel like I didn't keep my mouth shut. I have said something, and I feel proud of myself, because knowing myself in the past, I probably would have said nothing and I would have sat there. So I think that's small.
Felt frustrated, and all that negative energy
Exactly,
stays
and the body
there.
holds all that trauma. The body remembers, and you are programming yourself in every situation, in every occurrence. So what's one small shift that I can make that can change my body posture, the way that I feel, the way that I think, the way that I move in the world?
Absolutely. So recently you've got into public speaking.
Yes.
I've seen, so you're doing more and more talks. How's that going? And tell us a bit about that. Like, what's your message? How do you feel about that?
So when I was younger, I always used to be on stages and I used to sing.
Okay.
And I really felt that was home for me. And over the years, I decided somewhere along the line when I moved into corporate that that's not for me. Like, I don't want to be doing public speaking. I don't want to be on stages. I don't want to be singing. And with this work that I've started to do, and women's empowerment and leadership, I realized that, if you have something important to say, it's important to also get over this fear of getting up on stages and talking about it. And for me, I went through a phase of when social anxiety kicked in during my phase of when I was living in London. I realized that that was part of me keeping my voice to myself. And although I had things that I wanted to say, I wasn't able to share them. And therefore, when public speaking came up, I thought, it's time for me to step on stages and say what I have to say, because there's an important message that people need to connect with, and for them to know that they are so powerful, that they have the ability to do anything that they want. It is within their own power to shift that narrative of how they think of themselves and how they see themselves. And part of leadership is being able to stand on stages and being able to share your truth, your authenticity with the world.
So is that your message? Is that your key message that you want to impart when you talk to people or with your clients, just to really empower them?
To empower them, to know that they have so much more power within them than what they know.
Yeah.
And that does come from using the voice as well.
And how does this translate into being a mummy? You've got two very young children. Yeah. So how do you, being a mummy is the hardest job, the most rewarding job. But how do you give that to your children? What advice do you have for, new mothers to really empower children, to really let them shine? What would your tips be?
I would say build their confidence young. And let them know who they are as well. Just remind them of how much
who they can be, because
how much potential they have,
who they are, but they can grow into whoever they want, and they'll be amazing.
And to trust their instincts. I think the most important thing you can do for your kids is to develop that instinct within them, to know that, okay, that feels right, that doesn't feel right. How do I follow my heart more? How do I listen to my intuition, my body? A lot of the times, you hear parents say, oh, go and kiss that uncle. Go on. And you can see that the child's really doesn't want to do that. And you are teaching them to dishonor their body and dishonor their nose. So, just to remind parents that it's really important to watch your kids and observe what is it that they truly need, and how do I encourage them to tap into their truth more and more.
Yeah. And I think in this part of the world we do, I guess anywhere, but I know definitely the Middle East and Mediterranean, we put so much pressure on our kids, oh yeah, the best jobs are these and that's what we want. And it's done absolutely out of place of love. People work really hard here and they give everything to their children and they want the best for them. But sometimes the kids don't want to be lawyers or accountants, or like you were saying, like you did this to please your parents and then ended up with your anxiety because you realized it wasn't you and that wasn't where you were going to find happiness. A quote that I love is, I'm good at what I love, but I don't always love what I'm good at. And so, their children can do loads of things. They can be good at them, but what do they love? That's what I always tell my kids as well. I'm like, you're amazing. And I can't wait to see what you do. I can't wait to see what you become, because I'm just like the spectator. So I'm not there as the director in their lives. I'm there, okay, of course I'm going to be a soundboard. Of course I'm going to give a bit of advice and, try and, promote eating fruits and veggies and whatever else it is, or study, or, not fall off a bike, like all of these things, of course. But, with the bigger picture in mind, they have to just, be free to find out who they are and just, I'm always like, I can't wait to see. I'm already proud of you. You're amazing.
I think being a mother is the most important role that I hold, and one that I would never, ever change. And it takes up, more than 70 to 80% of my time, and the other 20% is
110%. And then we fit in the rest.
We fit in the rest, exactly. And I think when there's women that do a lot within the world, it's like you kind of don't show that side of you, but that's the most essential part, and the part that really takes up most time as a woman.
Yeah, definitely. Nothing replaces the mama. So did you have a mentor because there's been so much growth in your life so far, and purposeful, so you haven't just stumbled into that. I think you realized then at a young age, okay, I need to spend time on myself, I need to develop, and you're developing and kind of owning those developments, from fitness to speaking to, you've got your own podcast, to your coaching. And so these moves have been very intentional and purposeful. So did you have a mentor in that? Do you read a lot in that? Was there someone who helped you? Did you have a coach? Did you look up to, I don't know, a grandparent?
So I believe that if in order to grow, you always need someone who's already been there, who's already taken the steps that you've taken. So in every decision, in every path that I've taken, I've always had a mentor to guide me in the direction of whatever it is I want to achieve. So for example, public speaking, most recently, I had a coach that helped me. How do I implement that persona on stage? How do I stand there more confidently, posture, how to speak? Before that, when I was rediscovering myself, I was working with coaches like Tony Robbins and Dr. Joe Dispenza when I wanted to go into more meditation. So I've always had different kinds of mentors, and I would say that they're mentors, therapists, spiritual gurus. So it's been a range of influences within my life and for my own growth. And I think that's such an important part of my own development, and perhaps one of the most key parts that has helped me grow so fast, because I have trusted mentors to take me there.
Trust the process. And you found them out, because that's the first massive step that most people don't take. They're just like waiting for it. But,
yes. It takes a lot of work as well.
Absolutely.
A lot of inner work and a lot of
time
and time to also look within.
And it's quite scary for a lot of people.
Yes.
A lot of people are like, I'd rather deflect, I don't want to look within. There's too much sadness or darkness or scary things I don't even know, so let's not touch it.
I couldn't imagine living that way, though. I think for me, there's so much fear around what I couldn't explore, perhaps, right? So if I can look at the future and think, okay, I could have done X, Y, and Z, but I didn't, that scares me more than taking the time to look within and say, okay, well, what's stopping me from getting there?
Yeah, absolutely. You never regret what you did. You'll only regret what you didn't do.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that note, what is your favourite quote?
be you because everyone else is taken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So true. 8 billion people in the world, and there's only one of you.
So many times we try and be someone else. And yet they say that if the path is clear ahead of you, it's probably not yours.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So we have a bonus question, the closing question on this podcast. So this is these are all questions that the team have put together. Let's see what you got.
What's a mistake you've made in your career that taught you an important lesson?
I love that. Everybody pulls out something as if it was written for them.
Yeah.
Like if they're in food, they'll pull out something on food. If they're, I don't know, and teaching, they'll pull out something. It's amazing.
What's a mistake you've made in your career that has taught you an important lesson? I think following a path that wasn't mine to start with. That was my first and foremost most important lesson.
Yeah.
Just realizing that wasn't for me. And I would say, thank God I realized early on, because there's many people that spend years in a career and then they'll say, oh, it was never for me. Whereas for me, it was very early on. I remember my dad's, saying, you're going to carry on. You're going to keep studying this. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. But I know that it's not what I want to do. So
you got the degree. So,
yes, exactly.
That's what I always say to people when I see, even when I was at uni and I'd see people say, but I don't want to do it. I'm going to change. I'd be like, you've done half of it. Just finish it. Like, who cares? You don't have to work in it.
Yeah.
Like, education is education, and it's nice. Like, I push myself to read books that I'm not into, or, I invariably will fall asleep if I'm listening to finance podcasts. But, it's good to learn things. And try different avenues. I'm sure you made friends in that, and that you wouldn't have known otherwise, or just had experiences. So
I think, every step that you take is the foundation of who you become today.
Yes.
So without that, I wouldn't have been the Hélène today. So it's an essential part of my
absolutely
growth.
Yeah, I love that. And just follow your instincts.
Yes.
Like early, don't, keep saying, oh, it's fine. And then later be like, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to cover, Hélène, before we close?
That's all, Farah, I think.
Well, I think it was really nice. It's
a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So much advice and golden nuggets in this episode. So thank you so much for sharing, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it helps us more than you may realize. If you are planning on coming to visit us at St. Raphael Resort and Marina, feel free to email our reservations team quoting Hotel Talk and receive an exclusive offer just for you. We look forward to seeing you soon, hearing your feedback about our show, and producing many, many more interesting episodes just for you, our listener, and our valued guest in mind. Thank you so much, and take care.